Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Tigers Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Schulte, back from Michigan, back from visiting my folks. It was a good week. For me, not so much for the Tigers. The Tigers suffering their first losing week of the season. And you could say, oh, well, they didn't do well against in the first week of the season. Well, yeah, but the first full week of the season they won. The first not full week of the season, of course, they lost that 3-game series, getting swept by the Dodgers. That being a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series, which was really weird, but it is what it is. But they still won that week because they took 2 out of 3 from Seattle and then took 3 out of 3, sweeping the White Sox at home. So that was a thing. This is their first losing week. They went 2-4 this week, courtesy of a sweep at the hands of the Mariners today. It's kind of interesting how you look at things. First of all, let's start off with the injury report. Sawyer Gipson-Long will be throwing a bullpen session during the All-Star break. And there's some other players that are going to be rehabbing some things. Kerry Carpenter is going to do some rehab down in Lakeland. Because it's the All-Star break, affiliates aren't playing, so the Mud Hens, none of the minor league teams are playing. So as a result, the major league clubs have to have their players do their rehabs in a little bit different manner. There's no rehab starts, of course. And I don't think Sawyer Gipson-Long is ready for that. And I don't think Kerry Carpenter is ready to actually have a rehab assignment. But any work that they need to do, any treatment that they need to get, they need to go to Lakeland, Florida to get it. So that's a thing. Now, Reese Olson was reactivated from the injured list on the 4th of July, and he pitched pretty well in his first 2 starts, to be honest. Labored a little bit, but he was able to get through the struggles that he was having and got a win in both of his games, both of his starts. Actually, I don't think he won the Cleveland start. I think it was a no decision for him. But he did win the start against Tampa. But it's kind of weird because if you look at how the game works, when Detroit took the first 2 games of the Seattle series back in March and early April, so I believe it was March 30th and 31st. No. Yeah, March 30th and 31st. Actually, it was March 31st and April 1st. But either way, when they took the first 2 games in Seattle with Jackson Jobe and making his big league starting debut, his big league debut was, of course, out of the bullpen last year. But with him making his big league starting debut and Casey Mize with his first start of the year, I honestly figured, all right, Skubal going in game 3, Detroit's going to sweep that series. Skubal got, for him, lit up. Gave up 3 runs in 5 1/3. So they go to Cleveland over the 4th of July weekend, and they take the first 2. And I figure Skubal's on the mound. They should sweep, but I doubt it because it's so hard to sweep, especially a team like Cleveland. And they sweep them, but Skubal doesn't factor in the decision. Okay, now we're moving forward a week. They took the first 2 out of 3 against Tampa. They lost the last game against Tampa. They lost the first 2 to Seattle in spectacular fashion. You're figuring the first one they should have won because it was Skubal. So they lost the last game to Tampa. And you're like, oh, well, they'll get at least one against Seattle because Skubal's pitching on Friday. He, by Skubal's standards, gets absolutely lit up. Gives up 4 runs, only goes 5 1/3. So it's just interesting how the game works in those ways where you think you know what's going to happen, you think you might have an idea what might happen, and it just completely goes off script. So, what are we looking at? Coming into the All-Star break, Detroit is 59-38 through 97 games, 21 games over 500. Best record in baseball. And this is after a 4-game losing streak. Good teams go through losing streaks, folks. The Dodgers lost 6 in a row. The difference between the Dodgers and the Tigers is the Tigers can afford to go through this long losing streak right now because they've got an 11.5 game lead. They've lost 4 games in a row, and they've only lost 2.5 games in the standings. Minnesota's only been able to make up 2.5 games on the Tigers. They had a 14-game lead going into play last Tuesday. And between Tuesday and today, Minnesota leapfrogged Kansas City and still trails Detroit by 11.5 games. I'm not that worried about this losing streak. It gets up to 7 or 8 games, I'm going to start having a problem. But right now, I'm not too worried about it. Congratulations, by the way, to Javi Baez, Gleyber Torres, Riley Green, and Tarik Skubal. Baez and Green are 2 of your starting outfielders for the American League All-Star game. And Torres is your starting second baseman, and Tarik Skubal is your starting pitcher. Opposite who? Paul Skeens. So I get the Skubal-Skeens matchup that I want, but I want it between the Tigers and the Pirates, not between the American League All-Stars and the National League All-Stars. Because it's not going to be as good. And it's not going to last as long. They might go 2 or 3 innings, and that'll be it. Give me 7 1/3, 8 innings of Skubal versus Skeens. I'm a happy man. Which brings me to another point. I want to know who floated the idea that the Tigers should trade for Paul Skeens. First of all, it's not happening. Secondly, do you realize how much of your farm system you would have to give up to get Paul Skeens from the Pittsburgh Pirates? This YouTube channel that I saw floating the idea of the Tigers trading to get Paul Skeens needs to go away. Because it's not a very smart thought process. It's not a good idea, and it's not happening. Detroit doesn't have the capital that it would take to get Paul Skeens. And if they did, it would cost them Kevin McGonigal, Max Clark, Bryce Raynert, Jaden Ham, Jackson Jobe. The list goes on. You would have to give up 6 or 7 players to get Paul Skeens from Pittsburgh right now. For the simple fact that he's got 5 years of control left. And don't look now, but Pittsburgh's actually playing decent ball. So let's drop that idea, folks, because it's not going to happen. It's just not. Now, what I do agree with are the people who are saying that Skubal's gone after the end of next year. Detroit's not going to pony up $40+ million a year for 13 to 14 years like Tarik Skubal wants. And like Tarik Skubal is going to get. They're just not. Sorry to tell you, folks. Chris Ilitch isn't opening up that pocketbook. And even if he did, he wouldn't do it for that long term of a deal. He just wouldn't. And Scott Harris doesn't like signing long-term deals like that. That's why Scott Harris is the president of baseball operations, because he follows the same playbook that Chris Ilitch follows. Spend little, win as much as you can in the margins. Don't play checkbook baseball. So at the end of the day, Tarik Skubal is gone after 2026. You watch the winter meetings in December of 2026. It's going to be all about who's going to sign Tarik Skubal. And Detroit isn't going to have a chance. So Detroit has 55 games left. And 65 games left. And if they play 500 baseball, if they win 33 and lose 32, they are going to finish with 92 wins and 70 losses. I would take that record. That's going to win the division. All Detroit has to do now to win the American League Central is play 500 baseball. And I think they're going to play better than 500 baseball. So at the end of the first half, well, let's just say at the All-Star break, because it's not the first half anymore. At the end of the All-Star break, I figure Detroit's going into the All-Star break, I can tell you that I have a strong feeling that Detroit's going to win the division. They've got such a huge lead. They're not going to take the foot off. AJ Hinch won't let them take their foot off. They're going to play above 500 baseball. They're going to win this division. Are they going to win it by 11 and a half games? Probably not. But they're going to win the division. And they'll probably finish with the best record in the American League. Which means if you are an American League ball club, the road to the World Series goes through Detroit. Now, will LA catch them and pass them for the best record in all of baseball? Probably. They're too good not to. But get ready, Detroit, because you're going to host a playoff series come October. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can. TigersBaseballPodcast@gmail.com. It's the longest email address in the world, and I'm proud of that. At TB Podcast on Twitter. Sorry, at Podcast Tigers on Twitter. At TB Podcast at tweezcake.social on Mastodon. We will talk to you next week. The Tigers drafted a left-handed shortstop in the first round and a high school catcher in the compensatory round. That's all I got to say about that, because you know what? I'm not impressed with Scott Harris's draft this year. And we're going to leave it at that. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next week. Go Tigers.